Hello and welcome to this video and October's book review. I'm actually filming this on my lunch break at work, so apologies if the lighting's a bit pants or you can hear a load of beeping and stuff from Pete's computer. It's the only opportunity I've got to film this. So in October, obviously spooky season, I am wearing my Foolish Mortals t-shirt in honour of the occasion. I had already planned out what I wanted to read in October months ago to, stick with spooky season, and then I heard about a readathon, and for that I need a prop. So, let's get these on for the video. As you can see, it is a Disney-themed readathon in celebration of Magic Kingdom and Walt Disney World's 50th anniversary. The Magical Hopathon was created, and this is where you complete prompts for books, so it could be a spooky read, for example, or a 5-star prediction to match up with an attraction, a snack and a show for each of the 4 parks at Walt Disney World. But to get into any of them you have to complete your entry ticket. So as a big Disney fan and as a big book fan, I thought, why not give it a go? It's my first ever readathon and I was quite excited for the challenge. So without further ado, I need my phone for the prompts, so bear with me for that one. So for my entry ticket, I of course went for the OG park, Magic Kingdom, because it's Magic Kingdom's 50th. I had to read a fantasy or a book with magical realism. I went with Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer, which, if you didn't know, is a Twilight retelling from Edward's opinion. And as you can see, Edward has a lot of thoughts. If I had my time again, I probably wouldn't have picked this for a readathon because it is 750, 800 pages long, so it did take quite a while, and quite a chunk of my October was reading this book. But we went with it anyway. Goodreads said it was a fantasy, so that's why we've got it. I have to say, I did read Twilight, all of the books, and I've watched all of the films. I wouldn't really say I was a Twihard, but I do like the series, or did like the series as a teenager. But I completely forgot about the amount of angst that would be in this book. There's angst all over the place. But I did find that it did help develop Bella's character a bit more, obviously getting Edward's opinion on her and how he sees her and his perceptions of her does give her more depth, I guess. But you can tell for both books that the view is kind of warped, because obviously Edward's view of himself is very different to Bella's view of him and vice versa. So having both books, it's quite nice to see, I guess, the teenage insecurities in it, although Edward's like 100 and whatever, but the teenage insecurities in it. So I do think it's quite clever to have the companion to see the other side of that story. I just wish it wasn't quite as long. With this one I did find, and I was kind of surprised about how slow I read this. I thought it would be, despite the length, a reasonably quick read because I obviously knew the story, but I was wrong. It did take me quite a long time. I found it quite slow to get into the story as well. There are points that you're expecting to reach and then it takes a very long time to get to them, so that surprised me a lot. And also this one, because it's from Edward's point of view, doesn't quite have the warm fuzzy romance feels that it does, because he is obviously riddled with guilt and should he be doing this and all of that kind of stuff towards falling in love with a human being. So yeah, I was surprised it didn't go the way that I was expecting. But it did kind of make me want to reread the Twilight series, but I currently don't have those books on this bookshelf. They're at my mum and dad's house, so that'll be for another time. So yeah, not my favourite book in the world, but it was quite nice to see the story from a different perspective, and it got me into the Magic Kingdom. So that was Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. We then go on to our attraction, and I went for, so that it fit with my October TBR, The Haunted Mansion, and that is read a spooky book. So for that, I read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I was a little bit daunted going into this because I read Dracula years ago and I really didn't like it, and I was a bit scared it was going to be along the same lines. But also my brother said the book was really stodgy and kept saying how I wasn't going to enjoy it, so I was quite scared going into it. And yes, I did find it a bit, to use the word again, stodgy. I did have to wade my way through it a bit. But Frankenstein is nothing like what I expected. All of the stereotypes that I have known about Frankenstein don't come from the book. For example, Frankenstein is often portrayed as not very intelligent. You know, he's always like, ugh. But actually, the monster, I've called him Frankenstein. He's not called Frankenstein. He's called the monster. Need to remember that, because that's the other thing. But the monster in Frankenstein is actually quite intelligent, and by God does he like to tell you that. I'm saying that you don't actually meet the monster for quite a long time in this book. So again, completely not what I was expecting. I expected Victor Frankenstein to really like his creation of the monster. I expected many things from this book that just weren't the case. So although the book was quite wordy, it was quite a good portrayal and did have some quite good morals about loneliness and acceptance and that kind of thing. But I won't be rereading it because once is enough for me. So that was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and my prompt for the Haunted Mansion. Obviously, once you've ridden a ride, you have to go and have a snack. So I went to get the Cheshire Cat Tale, which is read a book with a sweet romance. And also, the Cheshire Cat Tale is something I would really like to try if I ever got back to Walt Disney World, because it's basically one of those really nice chocolate twists, but with icing all over it. I like the idea of that. But anyway, for that, I read The Switch by Beth O'Leary. The prompt said a romance. Goodreads and all of that said this was a romance. However, I'm not sure this book really fits that prompt because it's more about friendships than romance. This follows our characters Lena and Eileen. They are grandmother and granddaughter, and both of which are rethinking some of the parts of their lives. So in a moment of slight madness, they just decide to swap. So Lena goes up to the Yorkshire Dales and does all the stuff that Eileen would normally do as part of her neighbourhood watch and all of that kind of stuff. And Eileen goes down to London to live in the flat share that Lena has. So this is by the author of The Flat Share, which if I can find it, I'll add my review of that book, because I really enjoyed that. That was one of the best books I read, I think it was last year. So I know I like Beth O'Leary's writing, so I was quite excited to get to The Switch. And like The Flat Share, their characters were really well rounded. You really did fall in love with them and want them to succeed in what they were doing. And the sort of relationships within the book were really believable, and again were ones that you wanted to really delve into and get to know and all of that kind of stuff. What I like about Beth O'Leary's writing is that although, because it's a contemporary romance-ish novel, there is a bit of hijinks, but it's hijinks and humour that is believable rather than like completely far-fetched, which some books can be. But it does also touch on some tough subjects such as bereavement and grief. There's a lot of family dynamics in this, parts on mental health, that kind of thing. So it's not a fluffy read, but it is a very enjoyable read, if that makes sense. So although I didn't think this was quite as good as The Flat Share, I still did give this a 5-star rating on my app. I don't actually use Goodreads, I use Storygraph. I don't think it's quite as good as The Flat Share, but it was still a very sweet read without it being sort of saccharine. I still did really enjoy it, and I actually found that the more I read of this book, the more I liked it, the more I grew into it, and the more I got to know the characters, the more my enjoyment of this book grew. So as I said, I don't really know if it's a sweet romance, but it was a very good book nonetheless. So that was The Switch by Beth O'Leary, and it completed my snack prompt. So here's where I managed to squeeze in a book that would never ever fit into a Disney prompt on any of the other parks. So for my show, I did the Festival of Fantasy Parade, which always runs at 3 p.m. So it's often known to, you know, those in the know as the 3 p.m. parade. So the prompt for that was to start a book at 3 p.m. So as proof, here are the clips of me starting this book at 3 p.m. So I'm just sat at the dining table just doing a bit of editing, but I want to prove that it's 3 o'clock and I'm going to read the first little bit of this book so that I can match the prompt, because nobody likes to cheat. And as you can see, I read, and I'm going to have to read this off the front of the cover because it's so long, The True Story of Britain's Secret Police, Undercover by Rob Evans and Paul Lewis. So as you know, I've been trying to read a classic and a non-fiction every month. So this is obviously my non-fiction for the month of October. And I thought a book about undercover policemen would be a bit of fun. I'd get a lot of sort of jaw-dropping stories and stuff like that, but unfortunately this book just didn't deliver on that. This is written by 2 journalists, Rob Evans and Paul Lewis, who uncovered this story, and it's all about undercover police that get involved with political activists or people in like animal rights groups or like climate groups, that kind of thing, so that they can feed information back to police force so that they can make better judgments and stop sort of protests or that kind of thing. I thought it was going to be more about, you know, infiltrating drug gangs and stuff like that. It's not. And my main issue with this book, that it was just that it was too matter of fact. It was just sort of, here's a fact, here's a fact, here's a fact, without any of that sort of personal interaction with it. So within this, there are stories of undercover policemen in particular who get involved with female activists. They end up having like 5-year relationships and kids with them. But there's actually no like personal detail from any of these people. So it just reads as a fact book. It doesn't really read as anything of interest to me, which is a shame because it should be a story that is interesting. So because there is none of that personal testimony, I just found that my mind wandered a lot. I was thinking about lots of other things while going through the motion of reading this. So I just found it kind of dull, and I wouldn't recommend it to people. This is actually quite an old publication. It came out in... Oh, when did it come out? Oh, these pages are all stuck together now. So it came out in 2013, so I'm assuming the story has probably evolved quite a lot in the 8 years that since this book came out. But unfortunately this book bored me so much that I won't be trying to find anything else out. So that is Undercover, the true story of Britain's secret police, and fulfilled my prompt for the Festival of Fantasy Parade. And the worst book that I've read this year. So I completed a park. I completed Magic Kingdom, which meant I could hop to another park. So I went to Epcot because I think that's the second park that opened. So it made sense to me anyway. I actually started with the show for this one because I did Turtle Talk with Crush, which is read a middle grade or listen to an audiobook. So if you've seen, I can't remember what month it was, but whatever month, I'll link it up here. I tried my first audiobook that month, and in the month of October I decided to give another one a go because I'm running out of podcasts. As a complete aside, if anyone has any podcast recommendations for me, please put them in the comments below. So I tried out a audiobook again, and I listened to 13 Little Blue Envelopes by Maureen Johnson. And this followed it's been a couple of weeks since I listened to this book, so I can't remember the name of the girl. It's not Dakota. Virginia, Ginny. It followed Ginny as she takes on a trip around Europe as dictated by her auntie, who passed away and left her 13 little blue envelopes to give her tasks to do while she's on this road trip. I liked the story. It's quite standard for those kind of books, but I did enjoy going to the different European countries. A lot of them are ones that I've visited. One of them is London, so obviously I live here. So hearing, I assume Maureen Johnson is American, hearing someone like that describe places in London was quite interesting, and also other parts of Europe. I've missed travel, so it's quite nice to go on a journey, on a travel trip with someone else, even though it's fictional. And it was just quite sweet. The problem I'm having with audiobooks, and I think it's just because I haven't found a narrator that I particularly get on with, is I don't really feel that much connection to the stories I'm listening to. As I said, it's probably just the ones I'm picking at the moment. But I'm not particularly getting on with the format. And certainly with this one, the accents were dreadful. It was a female narrator, so when she was doing male characters, she was doing very stereotypical low voices, but then she also had to try and add different accents to them, and my god, it was bad. But again, it sort of takes you away from that story. So I think I probably would have enjoyed this a bit more if I read it physically, but it was good anyway to give it another go, and I will keep giving audiobooks a go just to see. I didn't overly get on with this one, despite the fact that the story was quite sweet and the relationship between the aunt and the niece I quite enjoyed. So that was 13 Little Blue Envelopes by Maureen Johnson, and my Turtle Talk with Crush prompt for Epcot. And then we were coming towards the end of the month, and I thought if I'm going to complete another park, I need to read some short books. So for my attraction prompt, we went on Test Track, which was read a fast-paced book. So I read My Sister the Serial Killer, because, you know, October, we still want to keep with the theme. Also, matches my t-shirt quite nicely. My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. This follows our main character, who is a nurse in a hospital in Nigeria, but her younger sister has a habit of killing her boyfriends, and she has to keep going around to help her clean up after said incidents. I have to say this book possibly has one of the best opening lines or opening sentences, which I would never normally read it to you, but it was, Ayula summons me with these words, Kuredi, I killed him. I had hoped I would never hear those words again. And that is the first chapter of the book. And I think, wow, what an opening that is. That really gets you into the story quickly and really makes you intrigued on what's going on with these two girls. Apologies if I didn't pronounce their names correctly. And you don't normally get a female serial killer, so that was quite refreshing to read. This book did make me laugh a couple of times. There was some good bits of dark humour in here, and I did enjoy it a lot. I just thought that it was a bit short. I don't normally say that about books, but I found that this one was a little bit jolty. I feel like there should have been a bit more explanation to some things. There were some bits that weren't quite explained, and you sort of had to make up your own opinion on, such as what happened to their dad, for example. But there were lots of other bits like that I feel like it needed to be a little bit more fleshed out so that we could get a slightly better picture of the story, because although it was really good, it was very well written, it certainly was a fast-paced book, and a lot did happen in it. There are points where I felt like I'd missed out a bit because it wasn't included. and it wasn't explained quite fully enough for me. And because it is so short and the chapters are so short, it does have that sort of jolty feeling. You sort of feel like you're being whipped to different locations and scenes. But that being said, I did really enjoy it, and I'm a little bit upset that this is my brother's book and I've got to give it back. That was My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite, and had a lovely time on test track. Well, the last prompt that I had to do was my snack prompt for Epcot, and if you know Epcot at all, you know about the World Showcase. It's like a big horseshoe around a lagoon where there's little pavilions for different countries. So for the snack prompt, it was to read a book either set in one of those countries, translated from one of the languages, the author was from one of those countries, etc. I'm a little bit annoyed with myself that I ended up going with a UK author and a USA setting, an American setting, because I would have liked to have been a bit more broad with it, maybe go to Mexico or whatever. But I was going off books I had on my TBR pile here, and I needed something short. So I have I Heart New York by Lindsey Kelk. There is something quite nice about reading this for this readathon, because the reason I know about this book is because of the girl that created this readathon, so it did seem to fit to read it as part of it. And I actually happened across this book in my tube station because there is now one of those bookshelves where people can swap books for free kind of thing. So if you've finished a book, you put it there and then anyone can go and pick it up for free. So I found this book on there. This is actually the Glamour edition, you know, the magazine, which means all the text is very small, even though it's a short book. A lot of text on a page, making it slightly more difficult to read. Anyway, so this follows Angela, who runs away to New York after she finds her fiancé of 10 years cheating on her at her best friend's wedding. Short synopsis there, but that is what this is about. And I have to say, I think this book is just a bit too safe. It follows all of the tropes that are in these sort of adult contemporary romances, and it's not at all fresh, or there's nothing new or shocking in it. I mean, I think again it's quite an old backlist. Yeah, I mean this one's older than the other one. This was published in 2009, so we're talking over 10 years old now. So okay, I take it back. It may have been quite an exciting book when it came out, but for me today in 2021, it was just a bit run of the mill. I feel like Lindsey Kelk really did just write what she knew, which is never a bad thing, but I think I now want something a bit more, and something a bit more heartfelt and a bit more hard-hitting when I'm coming to these contemporary romances. I also think part of it for me, the reason I didn't enjoy it quite so much, I gave it 3 stars if you're interested. It's sort of fine as a book, but I found that the character of Angela was a bit superficial and a bit shallow, and a lot of it is based around the material goods that she buys or is gifted, and I'm not really here for that. I more want to know about people's relationships and that kind of stuff, how they interact with each other, than, oh look, I bought a lovely Marc Jacobs bag. As I said before, it's quite nice to be able to travel somewhere and to go to a place that I've been to before. This does go to a few locations that me and Pete went to on our last trip to New York a few years ago now, but there are a couple of things in this book that are a bit too close to home. So for example, Angela is with Mark for 10 years. Me and Pete are coming up to our 10-year anniversary. They're engaged. Me and Pete are engaged. Angela finds him cheating on her with his mixed doubles tennis partner. Pete plays tennis. So that was a little bit close to home. And also one of the secondary characters is like besotted with a man called Jeff, spelled exactly the same way as my dog. So that also took away from it a little bit for me. It does, you know, it does wrap up quite nicely at the end. It is it is an enjoyable enough book. It's just not something that I will rush to again, and it will probably now go back onto the Tube Station bookshelf. But it was fine, and it was enjoyable enough, and that's I Heart New York by Lindsey, Kelk. And there you go, I completed 2 parks in this readathon, which is not something I anticipated to do. I had only planned, I guess, as much as Magic Kingdom, because I wasn't sure how much I was going to be able to read, whether Midnight Sun would take me for ages, Frankenstein, all of that. So I am quite impressed that I managed to get 2 parks done. And if I did a readathon again, I probably would stick to books that are sort of 350 pages or below, just so that I could get through a bit more. I know readathons are a very it's yours and it doesn't matter where you get to, but I did feel a bit of pressure to try and get all of the parks done and to read loads, and it did take away a little bit of the enjoyment of reading for me, I guess. So I probably won't be doing these that often, unless, like this one, it is a topic that I just can't not be a part of. So yeah, on the whole, quite enjoyed my first experience of a readathon, and I particularly enjoyed the Disney aspect of it, and a way to celebrate the 50th anniversary without actually being there. So that's it for October. I managed to get in some of my spooky October reads that I wanted to as well. So all good. And now we're on to November, which might be a bit of a shorter book review video for you, because I think this one's going to be quite long, because I may not read at quite the pace and quite the ferocity that I did in October. But I hope you've enjoyed this video anyway. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already and you fancy it and you want to see what I read before the end of the year, please click that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!